صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فتور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكوهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب عليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآله
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقي يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد، يا حسن بن علي، أيها المجتبى، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله، يا حسين بن علي، أيها الشهيد، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر، يا محمد بن علي، أيها الباقر، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله، يا جعفر بن محمد، أيها الصادق، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن، يا موسى بن جعفر، أيها الكاظم، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن، يا علي بن موسى، أيها الرضا، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الحادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي الأسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله حاجات يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوب عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين.
السلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، ہر حسن کے تیر بدن میں، حسن کے تیر بدن میں، حسین تیروں پر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، حسن کو دیکھا ہے قاسم نے اگلتے ہوئے، حسن کو دیکھا ہے قاسم نے اگلتے ہوئے، سکینہ دیکھتی ہے باپ کو تغے خنجر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، نہ جانے دیکھے ہیں زینب نے تشت میں کیسے، نہ جانے دیکھے ہیں زینب نے تشت میں کیسے، جگر کے ٹکڑے حسن کے کبھی حسین کا سر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، حسن نے جاتے ہوئے چومے بازو زینب کے، حسن نے جاتے ہوئے چومے بازو زینب کے، حسین جاتے ہوئے چومتے رہے چادر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، حسن کے بیٹے کے امت نے کر دیے ٹکڑے، حسن کے بیٹے کے امت نے کر دیے ٹکڑے، حسین لاتے ہیں ٹکڑے وہ سارے چن چن کر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، ادھر حسن کے جنازے پر پھول تیروں کے، ادھر حسن کے جنازے پر پھول تیروں کے، ادھر حسین کے لاشے کی نظر ہے پتھر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، ادھر حسن کا جنازہ پھر آیا گلیوں میں، ادھر حسن کا جنازہ پھر آیا گلیوں میں، سر حسین پھر آیا گیا ادھر در در، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، تڑپ رہے ہیں جنازے کچھ اور یوں اکبر، تڑپ رہے ہیں جنازے کچھ اور یوں اکبر، کہ تیر کھینچ رہی ہے بدن سے خود مادر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر، عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پہ سر۔ صلوات۔
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. Surifata is requested for the Salat Salab of the marhumin listed on the screen and for all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Ayyamun Yujibu is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. Weekly program. Inshallah, the majlis for the 30th of Shuhada Karbala and Wafat Bibi Sakina alayhi salam will take place on Friday, September 17th. The program will start with Dua Samat at 7:30 p.m. and majlis will be recited by Sheikh Muteen. Inshallah, the Urbain program will start from Friday, September 28th. Majlis will be recited by Sheikh Fayyaz Jafar. For more details, please check this week's newsletter. Bibi Sakina's Day. The ladies have organized a Bibi Sakina Day program for the ladies and children of the community. We have several recitations that will be done by the younger girls and encourage parents to bring their daughters to the program. If your daughter would like to participate in the program, please reach out to Sister Noshina Kaki and she will do her best to accommodate them. Arba'in Walk Experience. Masjid Hayy is pleased to announce the Arba'in Walk once again this year. It is a way to revive the generosity of our Imam locally and to inspire all of us who are unable to go for Imam Hussein's ziyarat but can serve our community here. This year, we would like to encourage the young zawars of our community to make posters of what they have learned from Imam Hassan alayhi salam and his family. These posters can be art showcasing lessons from their lives or can even display words of wisdom. If you would like to volunteer or donate, please contact Sister Noshina Kaki or Sister Minaz Malikia. Muharram and Safar Fund. Thank you to all our sponsors for their generous support. Alhamdulillah, we have reached 80% of our target of $76,500 for the Muharram and Safar Fund. Please donate generously. We suggest a donation of $200 per family. However, any amount is welcome. To make a contribution, please contact Brother Murtaza Kareem or Sister Batul Muki as shown on the screen. At this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir to come recite tonight's majlis with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is strategy? Keep that question in the back of your mind, inshallah. We'll return to it. We're told in our global world that there is a certain key to success in order to succeed. Whether that's in an organization, an institution, a government, a business, or otherwise. It is vital for an organization to succeed to have some sort of strategy. In fact, if you go to governments, you'll find that there's a strategy or a strategic plan for governance. If you go to, for example, the business world, there's a strategy that comes forward in order for a business to succeed in the short term, mid-term, and the long term. And furthermore, if you come to the realm of sports, you will also find that strategy is imperative, especially in certain sports, in order to succeed and in order to survive and in order to thrive. When we come to strategy, certain times, certain things are very apparent and certain things are very evident. And when you come to strategy, it comes forward that certain times, certain things are not so apparent. For example, sometimes something in the short run, in the intermediate term, may seem like it was not a good decision. But in the long term, when you look at it in the grand trajectory of time, you realize that something may have been for the better. For example, you will know that the likes of Jeff Bezos, one of the wealthiest people in the world, when he was building Amazon, many people in the beginning said, he's just selling books. He's not doing anything special. He's just selling books online. But little did they know the vision of Jeff Bezos, where at that time he began by selling books online. But then he had a plan and a strategy to be able to build an empire online, which few are able to replicate. The people in the beginning would have just seen the books and thought that that's all of his strategy. Whereas there was a longer term picture. You will find this over and over again. For example, when you go to the battlefields, when you look at the history of the great strategists, for example, throughout wars, in the history of wars, because there is a strategy when I'm governing. A governance in strategy may require that at times I pick up the sword, and at times I pick up the pen and write a treaty. And when I go to the war, if I pick up the sword or the gun in our modern world, when we go to the battlefield, within that there's also strategy. One of the great strategists, according to the pages of history, was a man by the name of Hannibal. Hannibal came forward and gave this very epic strategy that historians say that he lined up his forces in a way where they had a smaller number and they were against an opposition that was much larger in number. But what Hannibal did was he put his weakest men at the front. People said, why, Hannibal, are you putting your weakest? He's considered one of the greatest army generals. Why are you putting your weakest men at the front? They didn't know his strategy. But he had lined up his strongest men on the outsides. And what happened was, when the enemy came, they attacked the weak ones, they overcame the weak ones, and they went into the center. And Hannibal had made a circle of his strongest men around. And when the army put their strongest men in the front, the strongest men came through and killed off those people. And what happened was they created a pincher, and they came and closed the walls around them. For the next 4 to 5 hours, Hannibal's smaller army destroyed and eviscerated the other enemy, and it was considered one of the greatest strategies in history. So sometimes we see the short term, sometimes we see the apparent, and we think and judge one thing in our hearts and our minds without knowing the long-term vision. This happens in governance, in business, and throughout times. When you and I, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, Allahumma salli. When you and I come to study the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, this Imam is someone who there has been so much propaganda done about him when you read his life, which I invite you to do. This is some Imam who even the propaganda has gotten to such an extent that someone like myself, or someone like you, or someone who doesn't know the history of Imam Hassan begins to think that is it true what they keep saying about Imam Hassan? That's why it's so important to read the pages of history. Not only Islamic history, especially Islamic history, but world history. Because if you don't read the pages of history from an unbiased lens, what ends up happening is you begin to take on the narrative of the opposition and the enemy. If you look at our world today, who writes history? Who writes what's been written? When you look at who's writing the pages of history, are they writing in a fair manner or are they writing in a biased manner? If they are writing in a biased manner, you and I need to be careful. Because remember, history is written by the victors from the worldly perspective. So the amount of propagation of propaganda against Imam Hassan can never be neglected. To the point that Western academics today, till this day, still are not able to tell what's the difference between the truth of the matter of Imam Hassan and what the propagandists wrote against him. Therefore, tonight, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few aspects and dimensions of the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, so that you and I can try to get a glimpse of his strategy, the great strategist Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and what he did in order to preserve Islam, what he did in order for us to be able to call ourselves followers of Islam, and why we are indebted to him till this day. At the first level, what is the goal that is common amongst all of the Imams, whether Imam Hassan or Hussein or otherwise? At the next level, what was it? What was the life and times of Imam Hassan alayhi salam? When was he born? When did he take over the mantle of imamat? What was the circumstances with him and his debate and his debacle with Muawiyah? That is, the peace treaty, what led up to it? Was it that the Imam went straight to a peace treaty? Or was there another circumstance behind the scenes that is often not mentioned? At the next level, oftentimes we don't understand the courage of this Imam. What was the courage of Imam Hassan? And how do we see it at the forefront? At the next level, what were some of the merits of Imam Hassan that were accepted and are accepted by all Muslims, Shia or Sunni, doesn't matter, irrespective of that. And finally, how did Imam Hassan alayhi salam lay and pave the groundwork for the Husseini movement and the Karbala'i movement, which you and I commemorate day in and day out in the nights of Azah. This is our agenda for the brief moments that we have together. Wherever you are, here in Florida or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. At the first level, what is the goal that is common amongst all the Imams? According to the ulama, if you want to tie a common thread from Imam Ali, or no, from Rasulullah, all the way to the Imam of our time, what was their common goal in those times? We often look at Imam Hussein alayhi salam and we think what Imam Hussein did is what we need to do at every time. Yes, what Imam Hussein did was absolutely right for that time and space, for that zaman and makan. For you and I, it's not always meant for us to pick up the sword and go to the battlefield. The common narrative and the common theme amongst the Ahlul Bayt, according to the ulama, is Hifzuddin wa Hifzuddima. Hifzuddin, Hifz meaning preservation. You know, Hafiz, someone who's a Hafiz of the Quran, they say they preserve the verses of the Quran. Hifzuddin, preserving the deen, wa Hifzuddima. Dima meaning blood. Blood of who? The followers of Ahlul Bayt, the faithful. Preserving the faith and preserving the faithful. Meaning what? The goal of the Imams was to make sure that Islam remains, that the true teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remain, number one. And number two, to mitigate the damages done to the followers of Islam and the followers of Ahlul Bayt. To save the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. They were not trying to have unnecessary bloodshed. And when you understand this in this light, you begin to realize the wisdom of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So when Imam Hussein went to the battlefield, he was also doing Hifzuddin wa Hifzuddima. But it's like a scale. You know the scale that you put, the old times, you'd put, for example, the wheat on one side and you put the weights on the other side and you would scale it like this. At that time, sometimes it's saving the deen, sometimes it's saving the faithful. At the time of Imam Hassan said, I need to preserve the faith. Imam Hussein's time, same goals, but the dynamics had shifted so much that Yazid had turned the tables of Islam to such an extent that Imam said, without my blood, this deen will not be saved. Therefore, he made that decision at that point. But Imam Hassan would have made the same decision. At the next level, who is Imam Hassan and what groundwork does he lay for you and I? What is this courageous individual that we understand from him and his wisdom? As a great strategist. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, according to historians, he was born on the 15th of Shahr Ramadan in the 3rd year of Hijrah. 3rd year, 3 years after the migration from Mecca to Medina. After the battle of Uhud. You know, the first battle was Badr, then Uhud. After Uhud, he was born, according to the historians. And he lives under the shadow of Rasulullah, under the shadow of Imam Ali alayhi salam. I want to come to understand what were the foundations around where did the peace treaty come about with, and how we can understand this. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is struck on the 19th of Ramadan in the 40th year of Hijrah. Remember, there's a 30-year age gap between Imam Ali and Rasulullah. Rasulullah is 23 years old. Rasulullah is 40 years old when he announces prophethood. Imam Ali alayhi salam, there's a 23-year period where he propagates the message. When Rasulullah leaves this earth, apparently Imam Ali is 33 years old. Rasulullah departs from this world. At the age of 63, Rasulullah departs. At the age of 63, Imam Ali departs. In the 40th year of Hijrah, Imam Ali is struck on the 19th of Ramadan, of Shahr Ramadan. And the 21st, he's assassinated. His soul leaves this world. When the soul of Imam Ali leaves this world, apparently Imam Hassan alayhi salam is of course the Imam of the time. Now there's a distinction that you and I need to know here. There's a difference between Imamat and Khilafat. Khilafat is the Khalifa of the world, of the Muslim world, the seat. The Imam is the Imam regardless of whether he has the seat or not. So the Imam is the Imam. At that point, when Imam Ali alayhi salam's soul leaves this world, at that point in time, Imam Hassan alayhi salam is the Imam. But on top of that, all of the people of Kufa, because this happens in Masjid Kufa, as you know. In Kufa, all the people of Kufa, they do bay'ah and pledge allegiance to Imam Hassan. The people of Basra, surrounding nearby Basra, a large area of people, Basra, they all do bay'ah to Imam Hassan. The people of Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, the modern bank or western bank of Saudi Arabia, they all do bay'ah of Imam Hassan. All of this region of Iraq, of Mecca and Medina, and these areas, they all do bay'ah to Imam Hassan. It is only Muawiyah in Sham who says that, oh no, I am the Khalifa of the Muslims. At that point in time, Imam Hassan begins to write letters to him. He says, hold on a second, Muawiyah, on what basis have you declared yourself the Khalifa of the Muslims? You know that I am in greater position of this. You know that my father was in greater position of this. You know that Rasulullah has told this. And he gave him dalil after dalil. And the tensions began to brew. When the tensions began to brew at that point in time, according to the narrations, the Imam ultimately said a line to Muawiyah saying, it seems like you want war. The Imam did not say, let's go to war. The Imam said the aggression that you're showing and the aggression that you're showing in your actions and your words shows that it seems like you want war. This is an answer to those people who say the Imam was, God forbid, cowardly or something of this nature, which is the propagandist said about Imam Hassan. He said, it seems like you want war. At that point in time, Muawiyah, according to this, the tensions brew. Muawiyah assembles an army of 70,000 people. Now, in these armies, these were not loyalists necessarily. You have to know this in history. They were mercenaries. You know mercenaries? Mercenaries are hired hitmen. So they would pay people and they say, you would fight for us? I'll fight for you. This was common in Europe as well, and this was definitely common in the Muslim world. People didn't have loyalties in many of these armies. They said, look, we'll pay you, you get paid, you fight. Nonetheless, at that point in time, he had an army of 70,000. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he gathers an army at that point in time of 40,000 according to narrations. And of this army of 40,000, he sets up two bases. Because oftentimes we think that Imam went straight away to the paper. He went to the paper and pen at a time when it was appropriate. But before that, he made the arrangements and he was ready to fight. But were the people supporting him? That's another conversation. So the Imam said 40,000 had gathered in support of the Imam. From Sham, Muawiyah sent 70,000. When he's sending these 70,000, according to the historians, at that point in time, Imam, he segregates his battalion, his army. He says, look, I'm taking 4,000 of you and I'm sending you towards Sham. And your job is to go and intercept the men of Muawiyah and then stop them, see everything, and then we will take care of the rest from the backside. We'll be supporting you throughout that whole process. At that point in time, Imam had set up two bases. He had set up one in Maskan and one in Madain. These were two bases where the Imam had strategically placed armies. He had divided his army up and placed them at these two locations. Maskan was a place where it was an open battlefield where they could have fought very easily and the Imam was ready to. Madain was that place where they had the access to the Persian Gulf and the likes, and they could actually get resources from. The Imam had planned everything out. But then when he sends this 4,000, the commander of the battalion, he says, look, and it's as if the Imam is giving a proxy. You know, in our world today, when people want to do something, they do a proxy war. Sometimes a proxy war is done directly, or it's done through an intermediary. So for example, behind two countries, for example, in our modern world, or historically you'll look at it, there may be something called a hot war and a cold war. There's a hot war that is directly fought in the battlefield. There's a cold war that's a policy war. There's also proxy wars. So for example, one hegemony is on the west side and the other is on the east side. And they begin to fight. You can go to the 80s, you'll remember. There's something like this going on right now. And they'll use countries that are in that locality, in that region, and they will support one of them on each side, and they will fight as proxies. You see the two countries that are fighting apparently, but behind the scenes there are two bigger countries that are supporting. Similarly, the Imam sent this one, and he said, look, he told the commander of this 4,000 battalion that he was sending towards the army of Muawiyah. He said, look, listen, I'm sending you as the person who's responsible for these 4,000 people. But you need to make sure you stay loyal to me, and you need to make sure that you do not go away from your word of supporting us. Why? Because Imam Hassan knew that certain people could be bought. And he knew that certain people, their allegiance was only with who was ever paying and writing them a check. So at that point in time, you may say, why did the Imam send a commander that he knew may do something like this? He was saying that this is not just about that commander getting bought out. It's about other people within that 4,000 army. They would also do the same thing. It was about the general populace. Are you doing this with sincerity, or are you doing these things in order to get this dunya, the material world? So he sent that battalion of 4,000 from the 40,000, and he went. That commander got bought out. Muawiyah paid him off, bribed him off, and took over that person. At that point in time when this happens, Imam Hassan is with his army. When he's with his army, he speaks to them. He said, look, listen, if you want to fight, I am ready to fight. And I'm ready to support, but I need your loyalty. Do not become treacherous. Do not become disloyal. Do not leave this camp. Otherwise it will be not for your own good. You will not do well in this. We need to stay united and we need to fight together if you are ready to fight. At that point in time, this is what the narration says, Imam Hassan went into his tent. As soon as Imam Hassan alayhi salam went into his tent, there was commotion. When there was commotion, when the Imam went into his tent, the people began to argue amongst themselves to the point that they began to ransack and steal things left and right. To the extent that the narrations say that they entered into the tent of Imam Hassan alayhi salam and they began looting him. To the extent that the narrations say that they took a dagger, a knife, and they struck it into the thigh of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, to the point that it went into the bone of Imam Hassan. He began to be bleeding. Imam Hussein came to his assistance. Imam Hussein took his brother, protected him, and at that point in time they went away. At that point we understood there was not any loyalty in the base of Imam Hassan. The people who had come forward, the 40,000, with a few exceptions of the people that were part of the Ahlul Bayt or the close comrades and companions, everyone else had no loyalty. At that point in time, when the Imam sees this circumstance and situation, he comes forward to the close ones and he tells them, look, we can fight. And he tells the general public, he tells the people there, look, here's the circumstance. Muawiyah has his army, he's paid them off. You and I, we can all go to fight, and I'm ready to fight. However, if we go and fight, you will not remain. None of you will remain. You will all die. It will be shahada. It will be martyrdom. Are you ready for it? They all put their heads down. They said, Ya Rasulullah, we are not ready to fight. With the exception, of course, of the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt were ready to fight. They said, we are ready to go. Hazrat Abbas, Abu Muhammad Hanafi and others, they were all ready. But the others said, no, we've seen enough bloodshed. We've had enough bloodshed. We don't want it. At that point in time, according to the narrations, Imam Hassan alayhi salam said, very well. Now comes the time for the peace treaty. But this peace treaty was not so much as a peace treaty, but in fact, it was a way to expose Muawiyah. Because what were the conditions? You see, when you see the conditions of the sulh of Imam Hassan, you begin to realize how far looking was the Imam. You know, sometimes we call it sulh Hassan, but it should be called the sulh of Hasan and Hussein, sulh Hasnain. Because if you read the history, Imam Hussein abided by the sulh of Imam Hassan for 10 years after Imam Hassan's shahada and martyrdom. That means that he was accepting what was going on. But it wasn't until all of the conditions of the treaty were violated until Imam Hassan stood up. Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood up for Karbala. So what were the conditions? He said, number one, you will stop the cursing of Imam Ali. For Muawiyah had started a tradition in Sham, in Damashq, to curse in the Jum'ah khutbah. Every single time he would curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. He said, you will stop this. Number two, you will stop the persecution of the Shias. You will stop the killing, the innocent persecution of the Shias. Remember, Hifzuddin, Hifzuddima. The Imam said, look, I'm exposing this and I'm telling you, stay loyal to this, stay true to this. Don't kill the innocent followers of the Ahlul Bayt, of the followers of Imam Ali. He put that as a condition. He said, you will pay a certain amount of money for that income that will be used to look after the martyrs from Siffin and Jamal and the likes. Those people who are the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, whose families have been killed, you will send money in order to protect and look after them. He says, number four, you will make sure that Muawiyah, when you die, you will not give this khilafah to anyone else. This was a key element of the equation. That when you die, you are not allowed to pass this on to anyone else. You'll see how that was violated in a moment. And he does other conditions, some of which have become popular, some which are not popular. In fact, he says that your governance or your verdict or your testimony will not be accepted. Imagine, you're the ruler of the Muslims and your testimony, your witness will not be accepted. So someone, for example, someone becomes a Muslim or someone becomes a believer, or for example, for a sin or a ma'siyah or a guna, you need 2 believers. Or for the moon to be sighted, you need 2 witnesses. Muawiyah could not even be considered a witness as per the terms of the agreement. How are you sitting on the seat of the Khalifa of Muslimin, so to speak? The Imam is exposing him. So let's look at it. When this happened, Muawiyah sent this, or Imam Hassan sent this agreement, and this peace treaty was ratified, and it was sworn in and it was signed. When it was sworn in and signed at that point in time, we're told Muawiyah, as soon as he got it, he put it under his feet and showed what respect he had for it. He had no respect for it whatsoever. And let's see what happened afterwards. After this peace treaty, was Imam Ali's cursing stopped? No. This cursing of Imam Ali was not stopped until the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, Umar II. So that was not agreed to. Were the followers of Ahlul Bayt, the followers and the companions of Imam Ali protected? No. Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi, the one who, when ISIS got his body, they exhumed his body and took it out a few years ago. That Hujr ibn Adi was killed after this treaty. So the followers of Ahlul Bayt were not protected. And one after the other, conditions were violated one after the other. The biggest one was that afterwards Yazid was appointed by Muawiyah as the ruler. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because during the 10 years where Imam Hassan, after he died, after he was martyred, for 10 years Imam Hussein did not rise. It wasn't until when Muawiyah died, it became clear that he's appointing Yazid, then Imam Hussein said, all of the elements of this treaty have been violated. And then you begin to realize that when Imam Hussein went to the battlefield, the way he exposed Muawiyah and Yazid afterwards, every single movement after the tragedy of Karbala, every uprising tied themselves back to the Husseini movement whose groundwork and foundation was laid by Imam Hassan. In fact, even the Abbasids, the likes of Harun and Ma'mun and the likes, those people became the Khalifas on the basis of them saying, we are returning the right back to the Ahlul Bayt. Although of course they did not. But that was their anthem, that was their narrative that they were saying. Imam Hassan was looking very far, because do you know that if Imam Hassan had not signed the peace treaty, perhaps you and I may not have been Shias today. Because the amount of bloodshed that would have happened, the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt would have been so few that you and I may not be even around. Imam Hassan alayhi salam protected and preserved the lives of Shias. After the time of Imam Hassan, the people who were the followers, some of them went out and some went away. He was able to preserve the lives so future generations could call themselves followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Otherwise, who would know? You know the position and the maqam and the status at the next level of Imam Hassan accepted by all Muslims. That when it comes to when As ibn Wa'il called Rasulullah Abtar, that response that came, Inna shaniyaka huwa al-abtar, verily your enemy is abtar, tailless. The response of the Quran comes in this world in the form of Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan is that individual whose existence and his birth, it says that the others are abtar and Rasulullah has a lineage. That's why when you come to the likes of Imam's courage, you come to the world of Siffin, you come to the world of Jamal, and you see Imam Hassan in his full force. You see Imam Hassan in his full abilities and his full capabilities. Imam Hassan was not an ordinary warrior. He was an extraordinary warrior, one of the most courageous. In fact, the narrations say that in the battle of Jamal, Muhammad Hanafiya and also Siffin, which we'll come to in a moment. Remember, during the time of Imam Ali, there are 3 wars: Siffin, Jamal and Nahrawan. During this time, you will see the courage of Imam Hassan at its peak. During the battle of Jamal, Muhammad Hanafiya, you can read this in Nahjul Balagha. Muhammad Hanafiya, who was the son of Imam Ali, he was to advance. Imam Ali looks to Muhammad Hanafiya and he says, Muhammad Hanafiya, my son, go towards the battlefield. But when you go towards the battlefield, go like a lion. And when you go into the battlefield, he's teaching him the rules of war, the rules of engagement, of victory. He says, go into the heat of battle. When you go there, keep your eyes on the last line. Keep your eyes on the last line of the armies, not on the first. He means, what's your goal? What's your vision? You're trying to go to that last line and eliminate the enemy. And he gives them all of these things. But according to the narrations, when Muhammad Hanafiya advances, when he advances, he begins to strike, but the pressure from the other side begins to gain. When the pressure from the other side begins to gain, Muhammad Hanafiya is pushed back. When Muhammad Hanafiya is pushed back, his sword falls. Imam Hassan alayhi salam runs, grabs his sword, he runs towards the battlefield like a lion, and he pushes the enemy back to the point that the narrations say Imam Hassan goes by that Jamal or that camel on which the opposition was, and he cut the legs of the enemy. And when he cut the legs of the camel, the battle had essentially concluded from there. It was downhill for the enemy from there. Imam Hassan comes back. When Imam Hassan comes back, Muhammad Hanafiya was sort of, according to the narration, had his head down a little bit. Imam Ali motivated and inspired him. He says, why is your head in this way? He says, do not worry, this is the son, Hassan is the son of Rasulullah, whereas you are my son. And the maqam of Rasulullah is above. Meaning what? Imam Ali never treated Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein like his own sons, out of respect for Rasulullah, because the lineage of Rasulullah continued through Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. But he said, Muhammad Hanafiya, that is their mother, Fatima al-Zahra, who gave them this courage that came from there. Although Imam Ali is very courageous, and Muhammad Hanafiya was not wrong, he was not bad. But the principle that the Imam has outlined. Furthermore, Hazrat Abbas, Abul Fadl al-Abbas, is that individual who's Babul Hawaij. We discuss him in Karbala. But what about before? According to the narrations and historians, the people in the camp, the youth in the camp of Imam al-Hussein from Ali Muhammad, whether it was like of Qasim and Aun Muhammad and Ali Akbar, they were taught how to fight by Hazrat Abbas. They were taught the warfare, the battle by Hazrat Abbas. When they were taught battle by Hazrat Abbas, do you know who taught Hazrat Abbas how to fight? His battle techniques? It was Imam Hassan. The narrations say, Abbas is that individual who, according to historians, on the night before Ashura, he says to Ali al-Akbar, he says, Ali Akbar, I've looked at the enemy on the other side, and I know that you, me, and our companions, the Ansar Husseini, we can take on the army ourselves. I will take one portion, you take one portion, the Ansar will take the other portions, the Ansar Husseini. And once they take out, I'll finish my part, I'll come help you, and we will finish one part, and all of us will strike the others. This Abbas, who was not given the permission to fight at that time, he learned how to fight and battle by Imam Hassan's technique. Imam Hassan is that individual who in Siffin, when Muawiyah's line, the enemy on the other side, overtook the water. You know, we talk about Karbala and cutting off water. If anyone has any doubt, I'm talking to the other Muslims of the world, about who would cut off water, you just need to read history. That's why Imam Ali, in his letter 31 of Nahjul Balagha, he says to his son, either Imam Hassan or Muhammad Hanafiya, the ulama disagree on this. He says, read the pages of history. I read the pages of history up until it was like I was walking amongst the relics of past civilizations. If you read history, it becomes crystal clear to you that when Yazid ordered his men to cut off the water to Imam Hussein, this was not anything new, because his father Muawiyah had the water cut off to Imam Ali at that time in Siffin. So Imam Hassan comes forward and he says that I will deliver water for us. Imam Hassan goes towards the battlefield and he pushes the enemy back to the point, and he tells his men to take control of the water and drink as much water as you want. But then they said, we should cut off their water. Imam Hassan said, no, we will not do what they did. Let them drink also, and let us drink as well. You see, in principle, in battle, the Ahlul Bayt, they never forgot their humanity. The principles of warfare, the principles of battle. Someone comes forward and says Islam was spread by the sword. You haven't read the history of Islamic law as it pertains to military warfare. Do you know that in an Islamic battle, you are not allowed to cut down the trees of the enemy? You are not allowed to destroy the economic infrastructure of the enemy. You are not allowed to demoralize the enemy by destroying their infrastructure. Sometimes you think, how is someone going to be able to keep all of these things in mind? This is Imam Hassan, the most courageous. Whenever it comes to Imam Hassan, God forbid, people saying that he was not courageous, or people saying that he was busy doing this and that, or that he was bought out, as some people suggested. You know that money that he was coming from Sham, from Muawiyah, that was used to look after orphans and the people in the city and the towns. This was all propaganda. Remember one thing, if you have power and money, you can change history. It happened in the era of the British, it happened with those before them. You need to read the pages of history, it becomes crystal clear. Money and power can change the paradigm of what people think happened. It happened at that time, it continues to happen till this day. People who said that Hassan is different than Hussein, Hussein was courageous, Hassan was not courageous, they are reading statements that are from the enemy that are talking about Imam Hassan. If you really want to know, then read what the true people said, the ones who were unbiased said about Imam Hassan. For example, I want to read the history of this Cold War, the Soviet War, for example, the USSR, the Cold War in the 1980s, in that era. I want to know what happened, but all I'm reading is the perspective of the Russian side. I'm going to see one picture, one side of the coin. Or, for example, I'm only reading the American side of the history. As the old saying goes, every coin has three sides: heads, tails, and the edge. Having said that, what's the reality of the matter? Similarly, when people are reading about Imam Hassan, they're reading a completely biased, tainted version of what happened, written by bought-out historians and bought-out individuals. I can't even use the term muhaddith. They're not people of hadith. They're people who are bribed. Nonetheless, what is the merit? What's the true merit of Imam Hassan alayhi salam? The historians say, with respect to this, Asma bint Umays and her husband are debating. Sunni reference, not our books. She is debating with her husband because both of them were companions of Rasulullah. They're debating who's afdal. She says, I am afdal because I served Rasulullah. He says, no, I am afdal. I am greater because I migrated with Rasulullah. She said, no, I am afdal because I served the daughter of Rasulullah. I served Fatima al-Zahra. He says, no, I am afdal because I served Rasulullah himself. And they're debating back and forth. Up until a moment in time, they both get up and they go to Rasulullah. They said, Ya Rasulullah, we are having a debate, husband and wife. You know, it's tricky territory. Sometimes people come to you, like Maulana, decide between me and my wife. It's a bitter poison pill to pick between. They were doing this to Rasulullah. So, Ya Rasulullah, pick between us, who's right? Rasulullah is Rasulullah. He said, Asma is greater than you. I said, why? Asma is greater? How? He said, Asma has one fadila and one merit which you can never have, which is the greatest of them. What is that, Ya Rasulullah? Asma, according to the narration, Rasulullah said, Asma is that individual who helped to deliver my grandson, my son Hasan alayhi salam. And no one can have this. This is the highest level of fadila, number one. Number two, a narration that is accepted by the Muslim world. Rasulullah is in the masjid. When Rasulullah is in the masjid, there's a moment in time where he is sitting with his companions. When Rasulullah is sitting with his companions, at that moment in time, they're sitting, and in his lap is sitting a 5-year-old Imam Hassan alayhi salam. You see, Imam Hassan's position was established and is established amongst all Muslims. Remember, if you remember nothing else, in the last 50 years, the face of Islam has been completely turned in the Muslim world. If you read the pages of history, due to petrochemical dollars, it's a fact. Why? How did Malaysia, how did Indonesia and these places that were so far become extremized or Salafized? How did it happen? How did the pages turn? If you go back 100 years, 200 years, the true face begins to emerge of what the Muslim world believed. The position of Hasan and Hussein was established by all Muslims. The position of Hasan and Hussein is a point of unity amongst Muslims. It's not a point of disunity. The first person who came out to say things against the Ahlul Bayt were the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah. And these were one-off people who were kicked out of town in their times. Hasan and Hussein are those individuals who are accepted by all Muslims. In fact, in a narration, Abu Huraira, who we don't accept, but the Muslim world accepts, he says that when it came to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and Rasulullah, he says, in a tradition accepted by the Muslim world, that from the waist up, and from the legs down, from the waist up, Hassan was identical to Rasulullah. And from the waist down, Hussein was identical to Rasulullah. That means if you look and analyze this, you realize that the pen comes in the hand, in the upper half of the body, and the feet come in the lower half of the body. So when Imam Hassan picks up the pen, it is as if Rasulullah is picking up the pen and writing the treaty. And when Hussein stands up and goes to Karbala, it is as if Rasulullah is going to Karbala. In this environment, a man comes into the mosque. Rasulullah is in the masjid, his companions are sitting next to him. He has a 5-year-old Imam Hassan sitting in his lap. Rasulullah knows. Imam Hassan born in the 3rd year. 5 years, this is approximately 8th year of Hijrah. 8th year of Hijrah, this elderly man walks in. When this elderly man walks into the masjid at that point in time, everyone says, who is this old elderly man? He seems to have a presence, an honor, a dignity. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, wa alaikum assalam. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I have some questions. I need them answered. At that point in time, Rasulullah says, if you don't mind and it's acceptable to you, my grandson here will answer them for you. My grandson, Hasan, will answer them for you. He said, very well. They go off to the side of the masjid. They have a dialogue. The elderly man, Imam Hassan, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. After some time, the companions, imagine, an elderly man with so much, they would think wisdom, knowledge comes. Rasulullah is not answering, he asks Imam Hassan to answer him. And you imagine the sweat coming, they're thinking, what's going on, what conversation is ensuing. After a few moments, this elderly man, Imam Hassan, come back. Imam Hassan sits back down. Rasulullah says, are you satisfied with the answers? He says, Bala ya Rasulullah, I'm more than satisfied with the answers. At that point in time, anything else? He says, no ya Rasulullah. Very well. At that point in time, he leaves the masjid. When he leaves the masjid, his companions are astonished. He said, what just happened? Ya Rasulullah, who is this individual? What are these questions? What's going on? And Hassan's answering? Because there is a tradition that is accepted by all Muslims that Hasan is in the masjid one time and people saw Hasan as a young boy, and at that point in time Rasulullah, they thought it's just a boy looking at the skies. Imam Hassan was doing that and Rasulullah said, don't think that's just Hasan looking at the skies. Hasan is reading the law in the heavens. At that point in time, this individual, Imam Hassan, sits back down. Rasulullah is asked, who was the elderly man? He looks back to his companions. He said, oh, this individual who came was Khizr alayhi salam. At this point in time, they were shocked because Khizr is alive till this day. But you don't understand this by itself. Why? Because Musa is Ulul Azam prophet, the one who brought a Sharia. He's Kalimullah, speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the mount. And when Musa begins to get a thought that he is the most learned, Allah says, oh Musa, go in the land and find someone who is most learned than you, more learned. And when he goes, he finds Khizr. What we understand is that the one who teaches Musa is Khizr and the one who teaches Khizr is Hasan. You see, we sometimes have looked at Hasan from one angle. Hasan is too elevated. Hasan is, as his name says, beautiful, virtuous in every aspect and every respect. Hasan and Hussein actually are the same root word. Hussein only means little. So Hasan means beauty, whereas Hussein means little beauty. These are two streams from the Prophet's life. These are two rivers that are from the same Prophet's life. Imam Hassan should not be neglected. Unfortunately, this happens too often in our world that Imam Hassan alayhi salam is neglected. Remember, he is Kareem of Ahlul Bayt. Kareem is that position that someone gets where they are of the height of generosity. You know, there's two things. There's Sakhawa, and there's Kareem. Sakhawa is that I get and I also give. But Kareem is I may go hungry myself, but I make sure everyone else gets. That's the height of generosity. We're told there's a moment in time where Imam Hassan would have his dastarkhan, you know, where he would feed people in Medina every single day. In fact, there are some people, the Samari family, who still continues this tradition till this day of feeding people in the name of Imam Hassan in Medina. At that point in time, during the time of Imam Hassan has a man who's eating at the table. And as he's eating, he takes one bite and then he takes a piece of bread or something, he puts it in his pocket. He takes one, puts in his pocket. Takes one, puts in his pocket. Imam Hassan is watching this. Imam Hassan says, my dear guest, look, you can eat as much as you want. And if you want more to take with you home, we'll give you that as well. The man looks back at him, he says, I'm not taking this for myself. I'm not taking this for my own house. I'm not taking this for my own self later. He says, because the reason I'm taking this is that I just came here and I got the address to this dinner table from a man who was eating dry bread and some salt. And he sent me here. I'm taking this food for him. Imam Hassan says, describe this man to me. He says that he had the same fragrance that you had. You know, if you read the traditions, there was a scent or a fragrance that used to come from the Sadat of the line of Rasulullah and Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, up until the time of Imam Al-Kadhim alayhi salam, when the Imam himself did a dua to remove this fragrance and scent from the Sadat because they were being persecuted left, right and center. Because if you know the history of Baghdad, during the time of the Abbasids, when they built the walls of Baghdad, they used to drain the blood of a Sayyid Hassani in the cement. So at that point in time, the man says, his fragrance was just like your fragrance. But his meal was very humble. His clothes were humble. He looked and talked and appeared like you in every way. He said, yes, that's my father. And this is his dastarkhan that I'm just running. Because he is Kareem and I'm his son. And he said, but he won't take what you're sending. He won't take the food that you're taking. He said, why? He says, because he's Amir al-Mu'mineen. Remember, one of the conditions that Imam Hassan wrote in the Sulh and the peace treaty with Muawiyah was that Muawiyah, you cannot call yourself Amir al-Mu'mineen. He violated that. You know how he did? He said that I am the uncle of the believers through the relationship with the wife at that point in time, as you know. Because there was a relation through Abu Sufyan, as you know. His sister was married to Rasulullah. And he says, oh, I'm the uncle of the believers. And he used this in order to get this title of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The trickstery that people did. That person said, my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, will not eat this. Why will he not eat this? Why will he eat dry bread? Why will he eat salt? He says, because he's Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he believes that the true Amir al-Mu'mineen is the one who eats the simplest food of the subjects of his land. not the most lavish, luxurious foods. There's a moment in time, according to the historians, as I'm just drawing to a conclusion, according to the historians, there's a moment in time where Muawiyah would act very generous. He would take the money from the Baytul Mal, from the public treasury, and he would give it to people, left, right, and center. It wasn't his own money, taking other people's money. That's also how he bought and bribed people, and bought mercenaries. Nonetheless, when he sends for someone to make sure that people in Medina are bought out and given gifts, he goes towards Medina. From Sham, he comes to Medina during the time of Imam Hassan. When he comes to Medina from Sham, he says, I want you to give all gifts and presents and money to all the people who are in town. They give all morning. The Baytul Mal's open, someone comes, they give him money, gifts, this, what, that, and the other they give. At the end of the day, they said, who's left in town? The people said, one person's left. Who is it? He said, Hasan ibn Ali. He said, the grandson of Rasulullah? I said, yes. He said, look, everything since you've given in the morning, put that on one side, and whatever's left on the other side, take all of that and give that to Hasan. Imam Hassan, when he entered into the masjid for his namaz, for his salat, for his prayer, at that point in time, they called on Imam Hassan. When they called on Imam Hassan, they said, Muawiyah wants to give you a gift. He wants to give you this. At that point in time, what he said, what is this? He said, all of the wealth in Medina on one side, and all of this is for you, O son of Rasulullah. And then he looks at him, Muawiyah, he looks at Imam Hassan, and know that I am the son of Hind. Remember, Hind is the one, when Hamza was killed in the battle of Uhud, she did cannibalism. She ate his liver. And the Ahlul Bayt despised this lady for her acts. And so he said that as a taunt to the Imam, or to show his generosity. At that point in time, according to the historians, there was a man who had done another. He had done a prayer that if my dua, my hajat is accepted, if it's accepted, then I will sew some shoes or some socks for Imam Hassan, and I will put it on his feet myself. Because people knew and they respected Imam Hassan Islam. His dua was granted. When his dua was accepted, he came to the masjid. When he came to the masjid, he came at the same time. When he came at the same time, he said, Yabna Rasulullah, I had a nazar, I had a vow, I had a promise that if my dua is accepted, I will make these socks or these shoes and I will put them in your feet. At that point in time, he said, my dua has been accepted. He said, put them here, I'll wear them. The Imam said this. The man said, no, I said I will do it myself and put them on your feet. Nonetheless, he put it on the feet of the Imam. As soon as he did this, Imam Hassan looks, and he looks towards Muawiyah, and he looks towards his henchmen. He says, all of this wealth that you had destined and decreed for me and put aside for me, take all of this money and give it to this man who just put these shoes on my feet. And he looked back and he said, know that I am the son of Fatima al-Zahra. And he left the mosque. You see, those people who say that Hasan was bought out, na'udhu billah min dhalik, they don't understand that Hasan is the one who gave and gave and gave, and he never kept for himself. And when he wore something nice, he would always say, Inna Allah jameel yuhibbul jamal, to show us the principle of beauty. But he was not owned by the possessions. He used the wealth to develop the people and the land. Nonetheless, we leave that for another time. We turn our hearts and minds to Medina. Medina is the city of Rasulullah. Medina is where Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein grew up. And in the same Medina, the circumstances begin to change. Imagine in your own house, some people, sometimes they have to deal with difficulty when they go outside. But when you come home, you want some tranquility and peace. Imam Hassan did not have tranquility outside the walls of his house, nor inside the walls of his house. Ju'ada bint Ash'as is the one who gave the poison to Imam Hassan, alayhi salam. And she was bought out and bribed, and she was under the lure of Muawiyah, who had said that I will allow you to marry my son. And Imam Hassan had said, listen, you will not be able to do this, he will not do this, they don't keep their word. And if you know history, you know they didn't keep their word then. And even afterwards, Umar ibn Sa'ad said that he will get Rai, he never got it. Those people who sold their dunya, they sold their akhirah for the dunya, they didn't get either of them. This example is very clear. Imam told his wife that you will poison me, but you will not get what you are looking after. At that point in time, she nonetheless poisoned the Imam. When she poisoned the Imam, at that point in time, the blood began to mix with the poison. And then the Imam's, his organs began to elapse. His organs began to come out. They say the liver of the Imam was coming out. Imam Hussein is standing there. Bibi Zainab is standing there. Sayyidah Zainab is standing there. Abul Fadl al-Abbas is standing there. They begin to cry. When they begin to weep and they begin to cry, Imam Hassan sees Imam Hussein and he he says, oh my brother Hussein, oh Aba Abdullah, don't cry. Why? He says, La yawmuka ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day, O Aba Abdullah. What will be your day in Karbala? What will be your day when you will be on the plains of Karbala and our sister Zainab will be watching? What will that day be like? Ajrukum ala Allah. The narration say there was an alim who used to recite the musibah in Iraq of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He says that one day I was reciting the musibah of Imam Hassan when I saw a scene in my dream that I saw Imam Hassan, and he said to me, why do you not recite my musibah? Why do you not recite my masaib? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I tell them your musibah, I tell them your masaib, I tell them about how your blood and the poison mixed and how your liver was coming up from your throat. I tell them about how there were arrows in your body. They fired arrows on your body when they tried to bury you. I tell them about their difficulty and calamity after calamity. He says, you don't tell them about my greatest calamity. He says, what was that? He says, it was the city of Medina. I was in the city of Medina. I was a young boy. Some enemies of Allah, they brought fire to our door. When they brought fire to our door, my mother was at the door. When she was at the door, she was trying to keep the enemy out. When there came a moment where an enemy put his leg onto the door and he lit fire onto the door, and there was a nail in the door and he pushed it into my mother. My mother had a child by the name of Mohsin. He had become martyred. Oh reciter, why do you not tell them that I was watching as I saw my mother slapped on the face before my eyes? Ajrukum ala Allah. Why do you not tell them about my musibah? Imam Hassan saw this with his very own eyes. But what was that musibah? That when they actually gave the ghusl and the kafan Imam Hussein did to Imam Hassan, when Imam Hussein gave him ghusl and kafan, they want to take the body of Imam Hassan and bury him next to Rasulullah. When one person calls out and said, you cannot bury him next to Rasulullah, they fire arrows towards the body of Imam Hassan Alayhi Salaam. The poet says, पैका बरस रहे हैं ताबूत पर हसन के, उम्मत मिटा रही है आसार पंजतन के. अज़ादारों दो जुमले. आखिर में उन्होंने इमाम हसन को जन्नतुल बकी में दफन किया, मगर अज़ादारों ये इमाम हसन अलैहिस्सलाम है जिनको गुस्ल भी मिला, कफन भी मिला. हजारों सलाम हो आप पर ए अबना रसूलुल्लाह, मगर आपके जिगर के टुकड़े आपने कैसे देखे होंगे और ज़ैनब ने कैसे देखे होंगे. मगर आइए करबला में, यही करबला है आपका कासिम इब्न हसन, इसके जिस्म के टुकड़े टुकड़े हो गए. हुसैन चुन रहे हैं, कहा बेटा माफ करना मुझे देर हो गई. अला लानतुल्लाहि अलल कौम ज़ालिमीन. सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या अमीर अल-मुमिनीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैकी या फातिमत अज़-ज़हरा सय्यदत निसा अल-आलमीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या हसन अल-मुज्तबा. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. معتم يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya
Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya
Hussein, Ya Hussein. आएगी जब फातिमा, آئے گی جب فاطمہ حال پریشان دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، روبرو بابا کے جب خاتون جنت آئے گی، خالی جانی سرورے کونین کو دکھلائے گی، بلیا کی ٹھہرائے گا، بلیا کی ٹھہرائے گا، محشر کا میدان دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، رکھ دیا برچی نے اکبر کا کلیجہ چیر کے، رخ بدل ڈالے ہیں امت نے تیری تصویر کے، مالک کوثر ذرا، مالک کوثر ذرا امت کے احسان دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا نے شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، اصغر معصوم کے لب پر سوال آب ہے، بوند پانی کے لیے وہ کس قدر بیتاب ہے، نہر سے پانی نہیں، نہر سے پانی نہیں دیتے مسلمان دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، زینب کلثوم سے کہتا تھا شمر بد گوہر، شام میں جاؤ گی ننگے سر پھرو گی در بدر، کربلا کے بعد اب، کربلا کے بعد اب تاریخ زندہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، آئے گی جب فاطمہ، آئے گی جب فاطمہ حال پریشان دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا۔
سورة الورد الفاتحة۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله والرأي التي هلت بفنائك ونهت برهلك، عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بكيت وبكي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي ابن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس ونيس النفوس أيد مدفون بأرض التوس أرز المرتضى راضي بالقدر والقضاء السلطان أبو الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك طوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا.